Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, has called for the closure of the shadowy Israeli U.S.-backed aid centers in Gaza. Some 1,400 Palestinians have been killed since May trying to access food since the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation took over aid delivery. A new MSF report titled, "This is not aid, this is orchestrated killing," gathers testimony from its medics and others about the targeting of Palestinians seeking food at GHF distribution sites, which are in direct proximity to where MSF operates two healthcare centers. This comes as the U.S. says it wants to scale up to have the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation operate 16 aid sites. For more, we go to Ael Benois, Chief Executive Officer of Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, USA. Their new report, again, this is not aid, this is orchestrated killing. Avril, welcome back to Democracy Now! Explain exactly what you're calling for and what the medics on the ground, since you have adjacent medical clinic sites, have described happening as pamphlets are dropped telling Palestinians where to go for aid. And when they go there, so many of them, well, more than 1,400 of them, have been shot dead since May.
The reason that Doctors Without Borders, or as we're known internationally, Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, is calling for the closure of the GHF, and we don't even dare use the word humanitarian because it's not humanitarian. They're essentially death traps. So every time they have a distribution, the clinics are receiving mass casualty number of patients who are shot, or they are suffering from lacerations from barbed wire around the sites, or injuries from the stampedes that inevitably happen because the way the GHF functions is so disorganized. So it seems negligent, intentionally negligent, reckless, that people get injured. And so even, we have stories in our report of children also being shot. We treated an 8-year-old girl with gunshot wounds to the chest and a 5-year-old boy with severe head trauma, both of them injured near these GHF sites. And we know that it's linked to the distribution events because they all come in at once. All these patients come in at once and they say, that's where we were. Even one of my own colleagues was killed at a distribution. The airdrops are chaotic. Every time they try to bring in trucks, it's chaotic. And certainly the GHF is singularly disorganized, reckless, dangerous, and we cannot help but come to the conclusion that these are deliberately set up death traps for those who are starving to survive with a bit of food aid that they can grab hold of.
I wanted to get your response to the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabe, who's calling on the UN to collaborate with GHF. He spoke on Fox News.
The president has been telling us he wants food into the hands of hungry people, but he wants it in a way that it doesn't get into the hands of Hamas. That's exactly what we did when we stood up GHF. It's an American-based operation. It has the support and cooperation of the IDF, but it's not under their control. And the result has been pretty phenomenal. Over 106 million meals served at 4 feeding sites. The immediate plan is to scale up the number of sites up to 16 and begin to operate them as much as 24 hours a day.
You know, it's interesting, Avril Benoit, is that it was the U.S. Itself, a U.S. agency, USAID in July, found that there was not evidence of Hamas stealing the food. But can you talk about what was there before the UN's 400 aid distribution sites? Why were they shut down for the 4 of GHF?
So Israeli authorities have been striving to discredit the United Nations effort since long before October 7th, of course. So they had roughly 400 distribution sites. It was working reasonably well. You did not see starving children begging for food and bowls of slop on television up until this latest siege. And so now we have 4 sites. They're talking about quadrupling that sounds very impressive, but to go from 4 to 16 is not going to cover the needs. And it's not a situation where there's a lack of food. I mean, we should not be desperately begging for there to be formula, baby formula, brought in to Gaza because the mothers are so malnourished that they can barely breastfeed. We should not be begging for even the therapeutic foods to be allowed in at scale because 1 in 4 of the patients that we have surveyed of children under the age of 5, of mothers with newborns, breastfeeding women were malnourished, clinically severely malnourished. So, we shouldn't be, considering this anything but Israeli intentionality to deprive people in Gaza of food and also clean drinking water that they need to survive. The food is just across the border. The food should be brought in en masse by the hundreds and hundreds on trucks, quite apart from the GHF, these airdrops, which are spectacular efforts at public relations, very visual. They really don't drop very much. It's just the equivalent of a few trucks. We need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks, all the crossings being open. And that would address this unproven, never substantiated claim that Israeli authorities and the U.S. government has been making that it's criminal elements or Hamas that are diverting all the food aid. And if they just didn't do that, people wouldn't be starving on television. I'm sorry. The food is there. It could be brought in such quantities that you would not even have a question of needing to steal it or divert it. But again, there has not been any credible evidence that there was a systemic effort to divert the aid. People are starving because Israel wants them to. I'm sorry to say it that way, but this is the part of all the efforts in this genocide to deprive people in Gaza of the ability to survive.
Avril Benoit, I want to thank you for being with us from Montreal, Chief Executive Officer of Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, that's MSF USA. We'll link to your new report. This is not aid. This is orchestrated killing. MSF's frontline medical testimony on systematic mass casualties from GHF sites in Gaza. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.